Welcome to our 76 Capital Leadership Series. My name is Wayne Kimmel, and I'm your host and also the managing partner of 76 Capital. And I'm super excited about today's episode as we bring on a friend and someone who has done some really incredible things within the sports industry. Her name is Jaymee Messler, and you're going to hear all about her. And as you know, on our 76 Capital Leadership Series, we're all about talking with the entrepreneurs, the executives, the athletes who are doing the next thing in sports. And that's what this show is all about. It's about hearing from these entrepreneurs, these executives, these athletes who are thinking about how to take what is an amazing world of sports and making it even better. And that's what we like to do on this show. And you'll hear us talking about that. And of course, today, my producer, as usual, is James Santor. And you can follow James at James Santor on Twitter. He's a great follow, and he's doing some amazing things. You can follow me at Wayne Kimmel on Twitter and all of the different social media networks. Please reach out to us if you have ideas. If you're an entrepreneur who wants to do the next thing, who's trying to do something in the sports tech world, the esports industry, the sports betting industry, we want to hear from you. We would love to learn about what you're doing, and hopefully we can partner and help each other do some amazing things. So also subscribe to our podcast. You can subscribe to whatever your favorite place where you listen to your podcast. Subscribe and listen to all the great guests that we get to have on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. So let's get to it. We've got a great guest today. Her name is Jaymee Messler. You can find her at Messler on Twitter. She's the founder of the Players Tribune with Derek Jeter. She was the chief marketing officer at Excel Sports. And I guess most importantly, a University of Maryland alum like me. Jaymee, welcome to our show.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I know. Go Terps.
It's really great. I mean, it's so much fun having so many different, University of Maryland alums on our podcast. Most recently, we had Tom McMillan and Len Elmore, and now you. And it's really exciting.
Awesome. No, it's great. It's great to be here. How you doing?
Doing great, hanging in there. It's a crazy time, but what's going on is there are incredible entrepreneurs like you that have done amazing things in the sports world that are continuing to move things forward. And that's what inspires me and inspires our viewers and listeners. And I'm excited for you to share your story. So what we do here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series is allowing our guests to tell their story. Where they started, where they grew up, what they're all about, what kind of got them into the world of sports. And Jaymee, we'd love to hear your story.
Thank you. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, the last few months, even just being home, like post-COVID, it's so interesting, like where we are and thinking back, like I feel like when we're even talking about University of Maryland, to know that was over 20 years ago. And when you sit here, even just thinking about what sports looks like today and how important it is to day-to-day life, because everyone's so excited to get back into it. NBA season starting again. We're in the middle of the NFL, but it's been really reflective over the past few months. And yeah, it's fun to talk about it.
So, let's go right back to the beginning for you. Where did you grow up, and were you always into sports, or, tell us your story.
Well, I grew up, so I have a twin brother. And when you grow up with a twin brother, you end up playing sports a lot together, right? Like that's what we had in common. And yeah, I grew up in New York. I was a Yankee fan. I was a Knicks fan, New York Giants. And we used to go to games together. And my brother and I just grew up playing basketball, playing volleyball, and just playing games a lot. And I think that's a big part of my love for sports, because whether we were playing it or going to live games, it was always just a part of our lives.
Now, are you still a New York sports fan?
I am, although it's funny because when I represented athletes, as you mentioned, for over 15 years. And when you start to represent athletes, you become more rooting for players and individuals than you do for teams itself. And so it's funny, like, yeah, I'll always be a Knicks fan, a Giants fan, a Yankee fan, but it means so much. It means just so much different. It looks different. It feels different when you work in sports for so many years. I don't have the same affinity for one team. It's really about the people and the players and where they've played that are part of the memories and part of what makes me like root for certain teams.
Definitely. So when you went to the University of Maryland, did you do anything in the sports world while you were at Maryland, or what was your major there?
I was a journalism major. I did not do a lot in sports, but when I was there, that was when Steve Francis was playing on the basketball team and Joe Smith. We had a great basketball team, and so I was into sports. But no, I didn't play, and I didn't do anything work-wise with sports. But I started, in Maryland, and I don't know if you found this to be the case, but a lot of the sports agencies that started back then, like Octagon and Advantage, IMG, for some reason, and IMG is from Ohio, but I was aware of a lot of the agencies. I started to be aware of like what a management company was and understand the sports business a little. It was just on my radar. I did some internships, but no, I didn't envision a world where I worked in sports at the time. I was a journalism major, and my first job out of college was at the Watergate Hotel. I worked for a famous chef. His name was Jean-Louis Paladin. And to me, what was so interesting about that in terms of what I ended up doing was I loved, this is before there was a Food Network. So I didn't know a career in the restaurant business, what that could look like if I wasn't going to be a chef. But I started managing him. I was ordering truffles and planning cooking demonstrations. I helped with his book deal. And I just loved the idea of building a personality's brand and managing their day-to-day. And yeah, that was my first job out of college. And then it was after that, I moved with him to New York. He was going to open up a restaurant in New York. And he ended up getting this big job in Vegas. And I didn't go with him. And I ended up meeting Jeff Schwartz, who at the time was an agent at IMG. He represented Pete Sampras and Martina Hingis and Marcelo Rios. And I didn't know that at the time. I ended up working with him for over 15 years. He's obviously he's the president at Excel Sports Management. So yeah, that was early days. That was like 1997.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, and one of Jeff's guys over there, Sam Goldfeder, who's one of our mutual friends, thinks the world of you and loves all the things that you did with them for all those years. I mean, I'd love to talk about that. I mean, and sort of getting in sort of the inside and an inside view of what it means to work at a sports agency. I mean, you ended up becoming the chief marketing officer there. According to the team there, you were a big driver in helping them grow that business into what it is one of the biggest sports agencies in the world today. Talk about a little bit of maybe a little bit behind the scenes of what it means to work inside of a sports agency.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's funny. It's such a different landscape today than I feel like it was back when I think started in 2001. And we had 5 basketball players. The first clients were Jason Kidd, Tyson Chandler, Paul Pierce, Lamar Odom, and Jerry Stackhouse. And it was just a different time. Our office was based in LA. And for us, and for me especially, I was always interested in like the intersection of management and marketing and helping build these brands for the athletes. But, when you're working with people's lives and you're managing them, it's 24/7, and you just become a big part of the day-to-day. And I think part of, especially for me, and as a woman, I think growing up in the industry, I always wanted to be indispensable. So I really was a part of every aspect of our clients' lives and getting them to feel really comfortable and close with us, especially as we were building a new business. So yeah, when we first started, this was back when Paul Pierce was probably second or third year in the league. And it's interesting because I was talking to some of the owners of the Celtics recently and like just thinking about all of the experiences that we had gone through that I have just been a part of. Like the Celtics is a team that I always feel close to because of working with Paul for so many years, right? And his experiences with the Celtics, you become a part of that. Like it was so exciting to be with them when one of the moments I remember so clearly and like a highlight of my career is being there when the Celtics won their championship, because you just feel so close to the team when you see everything from the beginning. And I was there helping Paul off the court with his foundation and doing little things that just, and that's always been for me, like, I think part of why I liked representing athletes and helping be a part of growing a business is that I just care very much. And when you represent athletes, that's such a big part of it. Like I cared about all of our clients so much. And it's interesting. So we grew back then though, and Jeff is one of the biggest basketball agents in the business. We had moved to New York probably, I don't know, maybe 2007. And Derek Jeter's agent joined and Tiger Woods' agent joined, and they became a multi-sport agency. So it was really exciting to be a part of it from the beginning. And then obviously as we grew / as now even watching them from afar grow into what they are today.
It's really fascinating. We're so excited to have Jaymee Messler on our show today. As many of you know, Jaymee was the founder of Players Tribune with Derek Jeter. We'll talk about that in a minute. And we're talking about her time as the chief marketing officer at Excel Sports. And going back to the Excel days, I mean, I'm just fascinated. You were there for so long. You talk about having the relationships with the Paul Pierces of the world. I mean, and obviously then Derek Jeter. But you know, what were some of the things that you talked about working with their charities and other things that they were involved with, but you know, getting to know them and on a really on a personal level that many other people don't get to hear. What is it kind of like to get that close to some of these superstar athletes when their careers are just skyrocketing?
Well, I think because I had opportunity to work with some of these athletes from very early days. I think we all kind of grew up together in a way, right? So it's interesting, like when you look at the different phases of an athlete's career, like what it's like the first 5 years, like from becoming, you know, I would go to the recruiting meetings, right? So we're actually working with a lot of these athletes from either the time that they're coming out of college or just going to, it could be 19, 20, 21 years old. And being able to first help them navigate their career, move into a city for the first time, get set up in an apartment or a house, you know, set up their lives where they go from, you know, playing their sport 24/7, but wearing sweats and being a college kid or a high school kid to all of a sudden having millions of dollars and being an employee at a professional basketball team and helping them integrate and navigate that world. That's when I would always get really close to our clients. Like it's that time when they're vulnerable, they're just moving to a new city. And I spent I spent most of my time working with the NBA players as I grew and as the agency grew, I got to know the other sports as well. But from an NBA perspective, like those first 4 to 5 years are so critical. And I think the role that I would play and the people that worked at Excel, you know, that was, I think, a really important part because it's helping them get set up. And then when you look at like the second chapter of their career, which is like 25, 26, they're established, they're getting into the next contract. They're maybe at another city where you have to integrate them and get them connected. Now it's like you're building their brand and you're getting to know who they are off the court and helping them think about the things that get them excited and thinking about things that, you know, their life, right? Like managing all the different aspects and who they are and really like building that brand. So like working with Kevin Love and Blake Griffin, you know, that was like a fun time. And I would like even seeing Blake today, like he's so funny. So I remember he's always been funny, but seeing what he's done off the court he's like a comedian. Last year I saw him doing a roast on Comedy Central and he was amazing and he's so talented. He's got a production company. So seeing these athletes from the time that they're so young and what they blossom and now I think they're doing such a better job of planning for their post-career. So then that gets you into like that third chapter of their career when working with people like Paul, which, you know, then all of a sudden it was after he's won a championship and someone like Jason Kidd, who now is a coach, an assistant coach on the Lakers, like seeing them all start to have families and be fathers. You know, that's the part where I think it's really nice. I'm proud of the role that I've played in some of their lives as they've grown off the court, especially.
Just incredible experiences that you've had with so many of these, you know, elites, you know, some of the elite athletes that many of us, you know, look up to and love to watch on the court and kind of watch their every move, whether it's on the court, in social media. I mean, talk about kind of, you know, you grew up in the industry as we both did, right? Before this social media world. Then all of a sudden social media comes in. And what was that like, having to deal with that with some of your clients?
Well, it's so funny because it was really the precursor to starting the Players Tribune, right? It was the first time that athletes were empowered to have a voice and connecting to fans in more authentic ways. But I'll never forget, like, the two things that stand out for when, like, Twitter literally started. The first one is Charlie Villanueva. And his brother, who works at the Players Tribune to this day. I'm a big fan of the whole Villanueva family. But Rob would do a lot of the things for Charlie with his social media. He's very good at social media. And Twitter just started, and he's building Charlie's Twitter account. And I just remember this was like one of the things that all of a sudden the NBA is trying to like figure out how to manage these athletes on Twitter. And so it was like during halftime of a game, I think Charlie was on the Pistons, and he's tweeting all this stuff. He's not tweeting, Rob is. And Charlie is totally oblivious. And the NBA is like seeing this, and they come up with a rule. I think they fined him I don't remember what it was, but they fined him for tweeting during the game, and Rob's sitting there on the sidelines tweeting. It was just interesting to start seeing like how the league was interacting and trying to figure out how they're going to manage all these athletes having a voice for the first time. And the one that I find that really sticks out is, I think it was either Kevin Love's rookie year or maybe second or third year. He's playing on the Timberwolves, and who's the coach of the Timberwolves at the time?
Was it Flip Saunders at the time?
No, before that. Okay, I'll think of it. Okay. So anyway, they finished the season. Kevin goes to Hawaii. He had just like started, so he was tweeting. He probably built a nice following, a couple 100,000. Very early days. Goes to Hawaii, and he learns that it's McHale. He learns that McHale was out as coach, and he's like so upset. That was like part of why he was so excited to go to the Timberwolves. Anyway, I'm walking to the office, and I'm walking on Times Square, and I see like the ticker on Times Square. I see Love tweets McHale out as coach. So Kevin had no idea that no one knew this, and he just tweeted he was so upset that McHale was out, and no one had known this. So he's breaking news for the first time. I remember taking a picture of that on Times Square, and Kevin was so upset. So he canceled his whole Twitter account and started over probably a few years later. It was just like it was just like such early days. So yeah, it's just, social media has changed the way athletes communicate with fans, with how they communicate in general. And I think, like I said, that was definitely the precursor to us starting the Players Tribune.
Yeah, I'd love to get into that. And we're so excited, again, to have Jaymee Messler, the founder of the Players Tribune, former chief marketing officer at Excel Sports, on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. And so, Jaymee, you're at Excel Sports. At the time, you said the agency's expanded. It's now starting to represent players in other sports, including baseball. Derek Jeter is a client. How did you meet Derek, and how did this whole Players Tribune thing happen?
So I met Derek, so Casey, obviously, who's Jeff's partner at Excel, introduced me to Derek. And, I think we connected early on with the idea of, and Players Tribune was something we started talking about early because, I think I was starting to see how many of our clients, they wanted me to build their brands, but they didn't want to talk to the media because the trust between media and the athletes was just becoming more and more of an issue, right? Like, so many of our clients would get burned because they weren't thinking about everything they said and Kevin was another one I feel like that we had experienced. Like, he was trusting a lot of these journalists, and they would come out and write things that he thought was off the record or whatever. And Derek, living in New York for 20 years and kind of staying out of the media. I mean, it's such a media, Philly's like that too. It's such a hard media place to grow up in sports. But he did it so gracefully and elegantly. And I think we just connected on that. And the idea that, he did that so masterfully, but as a result, I don't think a lot of people really knew who he was, because he think he learned a lot of lessons early days. and realized it was better to just not say anything than to have his words twisted. And so we just, I remember having a lot of conversations with him about that. And it was a concept that we had connected on. And through those conversations, you know, I'd been thinking about Players Tribune, like how do you give athletes a voice and be able to allow them to get people to know who they were off the court and off the field, and to be free to have a voice. And like, when you think about where we are today, if they didn't have, like, I'm really proud of the role that the Players Tribune has played into empowering athletes to be able to talk about things that are so important to them. When you think about what's happening in today's climate, if they weren't feeling as comfortable, I think it'd be horrible. It'd be really hard. And I think it also then, you know, translates into how they play on the field and on the court, when you're not able to share how you really feel, whether it's things that are happening on or off the field or court. And so, yeah, I just think that that's where Derek and I had always kind of connected. And through that, I mean, we didn't, obviously that was years before we started the Players Tribune, but I helped him start a publishing company and started really just getting into storytelling. And I remember us talking about, we both have a favorite memoir in common, which was Andre Agassi's Open. I don't know if you've ever read it. It's one of the best memoirs ever. And very much how we built the Players Tribune, right? Like that, the way he wrote that book, we always looked at the Players Tribune as like the best chapter of a book for an athlete in a lot of ways.
Interesting. I have not read that, but I'm going to add that to my list right now. It's Open by Andre Agassi's book, right?
Yeah, it's incredible. I think he won a Pulitzer Prize for it. It's one of the best autobiographies ever written.
Wow. Well, thanks for sharing that, and hopefully other people who are watching and listening, if they haven't watched it or have not read it, listen to what Jaymee has to say, and let's pick it up and read it. But I'll tell you, you know, so you and Derek decide to go on this journey to start the Players Tribune. How did you do it? You were inside of Excel at the time, and then you created this new company, and, you know, maybe walk through some of the steps on what happened. I mean, and how it all launched.
You know, it's interesting. I was thinking about it the other day, because yeah, it was something that I'd always wanted to do. And I don't know that I thought through that, yeah, obviously you can't do it at Excel. It would need to be agnostic, that was part of our journey for sure. But Derek and I had talked a lot about it. And when he told me he was going to retire, that was the impetus. He told me he was going to retire. And we talked about the way he announced that retirement. If the Players Tribune was something like that was available, how would he do it? Like, he wanted to own his announcement and own his voice in that way. And so who never really, and still to this day, I think this is the only thing he's ever written on Facebook. He wrote a letter basically in a Players Tribune style that he posted on his Facebook, so that no one could twist his words. And it wasn't just like ESPN owning his announcement. And he owned his announcement. He announced that he was going to retire. And it was through that we kind of had a go big or go home moment. Like, this is the opportunity, if you really want to do this, to use this year to build it and to plan for it and launch it the day after you retire. And, you know, I had been at the agency now at this point for over 15 years, and I was ready to leave. And I think when you're a part of building a company like that, where you're so passionately involved or integrated into a lot of the athletes' lives and feel so a part of the fabric of a company like that, it was hard for me to envision just going somewhere else if I was looking to leave or do something else. It was hard to envision like just going to work somewhere else. But starting a company felt like something I could do, especially if like you have someone like Derek that's just as passionate as you are. Like, you want to kind of jump on that chance. And so once he announced his retirement, we kind of had that go big or go home moment. And it was like, we have a year to do it. We have less than a year. I think he announced in January or February. And so we had till October to get this going. And so that's what we did. I put a PowerPoint together, and I went and talked. And this was, and Wayne, you'll appreciate this, because I feel like there were maybe like a fraction of the amount of VCs that are interested in sports and tech back then. Like, they didn't exist, right? And I certainly didn't know them if they did, but there weren't as many. And I started just like researching VCs, and I'd go meet with them, and I pitched this idea. I even pitched this idea, I think, to USA Today. Like, I didn't know exactly how I was going to get this off the ground, but I knew that we had something there. And so I pitched it to a million VCs, and everyone was like, so you're telling me that you want to build a company that's 100% reliant on athlete contributions? Good luck with that. And so they'd want to have the meeting because of Derek's involvement, but we weren't getting anywhere. So it was like April, and I remember reading an article about Thomas Tull, who he had started Legendary Entertainment. And so he'd just done the movie 42, which is, this is when you think of 42, you think of this crazy year that we've had and Chadwick Boseman. But Derek had met Thomas during that movie. I think he consulted on it, or just maybe just because, you know, it was Jackie Robinson's story. And when I was reading about Thomas, and he's invested in the Steelers, he's got the biggest memorabilia collection in the world in baseball, but he's innovating in the entertainment space and storytelling. I'm like, he's the kind of guy that would get this. And so I called up Derek, and literally he introduced me to Thomas. And I think I was in his office that next Monday. This was like on a Friday. And Burbank. So I remember I flew to Burbank on a Monday morning, and he got it. And he was our first investor. He committed that day. And we were, I think the next week we were officially an LLC, and we were off to the races. And we spent the rest of the year, like every day I would go to Derek's house, and we would either have other athletes that were in town come over for lunch before Derek would go to the ballpark. And we were just focus grouping. Who wants to be involved? Is this something you would use? We met with Kevin Love, Blake Griffin, like all the athletes that I was working with, in addition to Andrew McCutcheon or Russell Wilson. We just spent the next 6 months meeting with as many athletes as we could and building this company. We would do it like every time he was in a home game on his way to the ballpark. That was our meeting time. And we did. We launched the day after his last game.
What a great story. What a great story. And what a, you know, look, the Players Tribune opened up a whole new category in the sports media world. And so many others have now followed you and tried to do similar kinds of things, different variations of what you've done at the Players Tribune. Yeah,
I'm so proud of I think we were probably a little early days, right? And like I said, there weren't as many companies like yourself even. When did you guys launch? Were you around when you were, or maybe?
Yeah, we were, not until when you launched, we were still investing in more of consumer tech businesses.
Okay.
The focus on sports has only been within the last 3 to 4 years.
Because I remember meeting you in our offices. But my point there is that because there weren't as many companies investing in sports, I'm not sure we had all the right strategic investors. And Thomas, like a year after we launched, his company Legendary was bought by Wanda for like $3 billion. So he wasn't as involved as we grew because of the changes that went on in his company. And so it was just an interesting time. When I look back, I think we were just a little early days. But to your point, I'm super proud of the role that we played in giving athletes a voice. And when you think about where we are today, like, I think that was really helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, you look at where we are here, today and the end of 2020, and we had this crazy year on so many different levels. And what has been one of the biggest things that people have talked about, is social justice and the voices that athletes have and can have, and what they can actually do to try to make this world a better place and move some of these issues forward, and what the NBA players did specifically during their season this year in the bubble. So I think but for what you did with Players Tribune, I think a lot of those things that happened this year, there really wasn't a roadmap as to what to do, but they had what you did. And I think that was very helpful.
Yeah, I totally agree. And even watching still the stories today, like through to today, that I'm still so proud of, that I'm seeing, like when Kyle Korver talked about white privilege, right? And having these athletes really be able to share stories that are so meaningful. When we first launched, I mean, Blake Griffin was one of our first stories. He wrote about working for a racist boss. This was before Donald Sterling had left the Clippers, right? And then having Kevin Love talk about mental health and where the NBA is today with mental health, in terms of having more people in the locker rooms, having more resources, and just having more male athletes and people talking about mental health. That's made an impact and it's a big part of who Kevin is now. And I'm so proud of being able to be a part of that, right? Like just empower athletes to be able to talk about things like that. I'll remember some of my favorite or like most proudest moments. Daniel Carcillo, who played in the NHL. I remember when he reached out to one of the editors at the Players Tribune, Sean Conboy, because he had read an article that they've done a lot of great stories on hockey players. It's a very underserved market, very loyal fan base, and they do very well. And Daniel Carcillo had called because he wanted to talk about concussions and safety and what resources aren't available for the NHL players dealing with mental health, especially with concussion related issues. And his friend who was on the Flyers had committed suicide because of these issues. And he wanted to talk about it. And I'll just never forget the video that he did. And now his post-career, his whole life is dedicated to helping make those issues. But I remember after he posted that video, he showed me an email on his phone that came from the NHLPA. That was an email to every player, to every team saying, we have to do better. And so that's my point, like seeing that how it could impact the future of a lot of these players' lives because they're able to have this voice is just so important and something that, yeah, I'm just really proud of.
Well, it did amazing things, and you really broke down that barrier to allowing these athletes to really be able to express their opinions, express their feelings, their thoughts, which is not only good, great for them and the leagues, but I think it's really impacted a lot of other people's lives and helped many others. So congratulations on doing that. And we're super excited to have you on our show. We have Jaymee Messler, the founder of the Players Tribune, former chief marketing officer of Excel Sports, University of Maryland alum. It's great to have you on the show. And, you've done some other really big things. I mean, I think also just from the fact that, as a female CEO in the sports industry, breaking down barriers, really being a role model for young women out there, seeing what you've done in this industry, break down these different barriers and go to the highest of levels and work with the biggest names in sports. Talk a little bit about how you kind of advise now younger women and younger people who want to break into the sports industry and want to do some of the incredible things that you've done.
Well, yeah, that's been probably the thing that I've been the most proud of also since even Players Tribune and after is just some of the incredible women that have worked for me. And I feel like one of the things that is important as we grow in the industry is to understand the different generations role in business, right? I think there's so much to be learned from younger generations and being able to empower them, but also rely on them. Like they have their finger on the pulse way more than you and I do. But it's been really great to be able to mentor and empower women in the industry. And I think part of the thing to me, like there's so many more opportunities in the sports industry today than there were 20 years ago. And there's so many more women in leadership positions. There's still a long road to go. There needs to be more. But seeing Derek just hire the first female GM in all 4 major leagues. And there's a lot of great things happening in the industry, which is really great to see. But yeah, I think it's important. We have to mentor and help young women understand what opportunities there are in the industry. And I think it's important for young women to have mentors in the industry to help navigate it, because it is still very much dominated by men, and there's a lot of opportunity though, and a long road still to go. But yeah, as much as I can play a role and send that elevator down, we always say, I want to be able to do that.
Well, certainly that's an important thing, and you've done a lot of that, and just, certainly you're doing it actively, but just your actions and what you've been able to do in the industry, and for young, not only just young girls and women, but just young people, to see what you've been able, the barriers that you've broken and things that you've been able to do are really incredible. And I hadn't really thought about what Derek did by hiring the female, GM, but that's really interesting. How he was the one that did that.
He also has a female COO there. It's really great. And it's interesting. I just texted him after, because I was so happy to see that. And I don't think he realized, he's like, well, she's amazing, she's a rock star. Like, I think he was surprised by how much PR there was after the fact, because and it's just an interesting insight for me, because I think that because he didn't grow up in the corporate world, he was playing baseball where we were all like working our asses off in the corporate, side of it. I don't know that he realized that was so groundbreaking. Like, to him, it's like, who's the right person for the job? But it's amazing to see that.
Well, Jaymee, you're certainly not done. You've done incredible things, as we've said, chief marketing officer at Excel, founder of the Players Tribune, breaking down incredible barriers around the just being a journalist in the sports industry, and allowing the athletes to express their thoughts and views and feelings. It's just incredible. When you look ahead and you look at the things that you're thinking about now, and you look at the sports industry in general, and certainly that's what we talk about all the time at 76 Capital, always thinking about what's the next thing in sports, and whether it's sports betting, whether it's esports, whether it's a new technology, whether it's a new type of just integration, technology integration into the world. Where do you think things are going to go over the next several years?
Yeah, I think, to me, that's what I get excited about. And you and I know have talked a lot about it. I love finding the white space, and I love being a part of areas in the industry that are just growing. I'm spending a lot of time understanding and building a new company that's more at the intersection of sports betting and gaming. And I think both those areas, esports, gaming, betting, and you're right at the intersection, and you were there early days. It's really remarkable to see how fast it's growing. There was a company that launched last week or 2 weeks ago called the Queens Collective. That's an esports company with all female gamers, which is, I was just excited to see that. It'll be interesting to see all the companies that are maybe coming out of COVID. And I'm sure you get to see a lot of the things that are coming out as people are pitching your company. So yeah, it's exciting, I think, to be a part of the areas of the industry that are growing. And those are certainly the big pieces of that. So I'm excited to also now take the lessons learned from Players Tribune. That was like business school for me, and try to apply that into building something new. And we'll see the future. Coming out of COVID, sports is going to look very different. So it'll be fun to be a part of that in a new and different way.
Absolutely. Look, you were there, at the, when sports was really starting to just become the next big thing in just business in general. And, you look at things like sports betting as an example, right? Until May 14th of 2018, when PASPA was overturned, if you were in the sports industry, and I'm sure you counsel many of your clients, don't go into a casino, don't go into a sports book, don't bet. That's gonna cause trouble. That's a problem. You'll end up being in a bad situation. Now all of a sudden, the sports betting industry and the sports traditional industry, they're partners in so many ways. It must be fascinating for you to think about that from just a brand perspective. MGM on the wall of Fenway Park and things like that. It's just crazy.
It's remarkable. No, it's true. And it's still, we've been talking about it. It's like, it's still kind of sports' dirty little secret. right? Like it still needs to be demystified. And it's happening so quickly. I mean, we saw, was it Bryson on the PGA Tour wearing DraftKings on his hat? The Raiders are in Las Vegas. But yet agents and business managers, it'll be interesting to see, they still are an arm's length away, right? Like Robert Kraft and Michael Jordan are on the cap table of DraftKings, but agents and business managers still don't want it anywhere near their active players because there's not a lot of rules of the road, right? And I compare it a little bit, but it's much bigger. But I compare it a little bit when I was representing athletes. You know, it was when alcohol beverages were just becoming, you can sponsor teams and they were becoming part of the arenas and stadiums, but you couldn't sponsor athletes, right? Athletes couldn't work with these companies. We did a deal with Budweiser, Players Tribune, and started to connect a lot of the athletes to Bud through content. And now Jimmy Butler's the face of Michelob, or, you know, doing commercials, right? It took a while to get there. And I think that's what we're going to start to see in the betting world. I mean, it's like you said, the sports books are in the arenas and they're in the stadiums. And you saw like Monkey Knife Fight is working with the union. So it'll just be interesting to see that crossover as the industry becomes more mainstream.
It's been fascinating to watch. I mean, just to see all of a sudden, the people that you weren't allowed to talk to as a business person in the sports world, now all of a sudden you got to know them and you got to be able to do deals with them. Right. The Denver Broncos did 3 sports betting deals in 1 week, and I can only imagine what happened inside of different, all the different, teams across the league going, oh my God, we got to get something going here. And so you're starting to see these almost every week, a new team, a new deal getting done. It's incredible. The same thing goes, I would say, from an esports and gaming perspective, right? I mean, it used to be that, video games were for kids and that's it. And that's what it's all about. Now, all of a sudden, this world of esports and gaming has become its own industry. You have over 200 colleges and universities today that offer scholarships for kids to go play video games, just like a Division I basketball player. And, and some of the same kinds of, you also have those opportunities at the professional levels now as well. So, what you did working with, some of the top NBA players, now there are agencies that are being created and are building and representing the next generation of gamers. It's amazing.
No, it is. And they're building brands. But it's also funny to see a lot of these esports teams hiring like older school, traditional, executives in the sports business. And it makes sense. I get it. But it's funny. And it's in education. Like, it's not easy to play these video games. I don't know if you play any of them. So it's interesting to see people that are not from the gaming world integrate and communicate. But yeah, it's a whole industry that has been created, and how much it's grown in the last 4 years is remarkable.
And you see the crossover, right? I mean, you see this incredible crossover with, like use Ben Simmons as an example, right? I mean, the Sixers get bumped out of the playoffs. Next thing you know, he signs with FaZe Clan. I mean, like that, how does that even work? How does that all play together? I mean, it's just really fascinating to see how this is now, as an agent and as a player, you have these opportunities now that you certainly didn't have in the past.
What's cool about, I think, gaming is it's an equalizer, right? So you can be the most athletic person in the world, like Ben, and play, but he can be playing against someone who's never played a sport, or women, like could be anybody. Like you don't need to have the physical talents to play. So it's really interesting to see to see how that's unfolding and what the team's makeup is and how that's working. But yeah, it's very interesting, and there's a ton of crossover.
And it ties back to the business side of things, right? I mean, how you truly are able to engage your fans. Yeah. As you're building that brand, whether it's the Boston Celtics or the Lakers. I mean, you're building this really, really big brand, but now you have these really interesting extensions that you can now have with that brand, whether that's from a sports betting perspective, a way to have fans being more engaged in the business, or from a gaming world as well.
Yeah, no, it's really fun to get to know to be a part of those industries now, and to see how they can really help. And it's also another way that you're starting to interact, whether it's like Twitch content, but you're able to do it through these gaming. Myers Leonard, a lot of these athletes, you're getting to see whose passions are there and authentic, and it opens up so much more opportunity for them.
So we're wrapping up here on our 76 Capital Leadership Series with great interview here with Jaymee Messler. It's been great to have you on the show, and I have to ask you, like if you were, you certainly are a role model and mentor to, as we were talking about earlier, so many young women. What kind of advice would you give them in today's world? What should they do to become like you and become a top executive in the sports industry?
I think if I could do it over again, and maybe it's partly because I've now built a business as well, I think you should treat your career like you would a business, right? Like get an advisory board, which become your mentors, put like a plan together, and it may evolve over time, but if you map it out and create that advisory board and that plan, I feel like it's a lot easier to navigate and be strategic, obviously. But having mentors and getting to know the industry. And I think a lot of people go into the sports industry thinking they want to be one specific thing. I want to be an agent. I want to be, and you can be, but intern and learn and experience, because there's so many parts of the industry that are so interesting that you may just not think of, like even what you're doing and being a part of building the next biggest, best companies in the industry, or being a part of marketing and, athletes, teams. I just think there's so much diversity and so much opportunity. So yeah, I think it's just putting a plan together and surrounding yourself with people that can help you grow.
Well, that's really great advice. And again, I thank you so much for taking time out of your day out there in LA to come on our 76 Capital Leadership Series. We love the stories. Loved all the things that you've done in your career so far. I can't wait to see what's next. Really excited to hear about all the things that you're doing, and wish you the best. Stay safe. And again, thank you for joining our show.
Thank you, you too. It was really fun. I'll speak to you soon.
Absolutely. And James, thank you for everything you did back at the studio. You can always follow James at James Santor. Follow Jaymee Messler at Jaymessler on Twitter. I'm Wayne Kimmel, your host. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the 76 Capital Leadership Series.